have been looking for a way of integrating livestock back onto the farm, because we're on some very hungry chalk soils in places, and they need the presence of livestock and manure to keep them alive, and to give them the nutrient and the organic matter build up that we really are looking for over a lifetime. There's a fairly tried and tested ½ a tonne a hectare for a cereal crop following sheep grazing, so that's
yield advantage.
Yield advantage. So that's a fairly tangible benefit. The bit that's perhaps not so easy to measure is the life in the soil that it leaves behind, the actual fungi and bacteria that it introduces. When I came back from my Nuffield, I tested a lot of soils under a microscope to see what the microbiota population was like, and it was shockingly low, almost non-existent. So bringing that back in to open the soils up, to get them alive again, breathing again, draining again, breaking down organic matter into humus, I think that benefit you can't measure, but it's one I think we all know scientifically is happening with their reintroduction. I think there's been a reawakening to the need for stock on farms, and I think a lot of the arable farmers around here are not in a position they want to try farming stock themselves, because the margins are very tight and it's a very difficult thing to make money out of. So I think there's been the greater opportunities have been through open-minded farmers rather than schemes. The structure in the shorter term possibly not so much, because obviously there's an element of poaching on the very top. With the sheep it tends to be very much just in the top, and further down the crops that they're grazing can also help a lot. If it's radish or turnips, something with a taproot, it's doing a lot of good in the soil in itself, and then the added benefit of the humus and organic matter being added back in over a longer term is going to do some real good. I think as a grazier on somebody else's farm, you're pretty much the bottom of the pile in the nicest possible way after the son's 21st that you might have to clear out for, after the hunt coming through, after the shooting dates, after the biosol is being spread. The list does go on a bit, so you have to be an individual with a very can-do attitude, and finding out well in advance what date they want you off, be it in January, February, and sticking to it and making sure you've stuck to it and you've cleared your fences, you've cleared your bowsers, your feed blocks, whatever it might be, so that there isn't any fallout over the way you've left things. The arable farm is the arable farm and has its staff, and the sheep business is a sheep business and has its staff. So between Rob and I do the arable because that's what I know and try to be good at, and he does the sheep because that's what he knows and what he's good at. I think there's great opportunities for people that want to move out of their traditional areas into areas like this where there aren't many livestock. And I think, as I've said, it does take an expert in livestock to make money out of it and do the system well. I think the modern way of mixed farming is to get two experts and make a partnership out of them, one in arable and one in whichever stock it might be, rather than somebody trying to be a jack of all trades and ending up being a master of none. This is only the start of our third year, so everything is still quite new. We've got a grazing trial in, or cover crop and grazing trial in at the minute, which is supported by the AHDB Monitor Farm programme. So we will graze that this winter, which is on some heavy land, which is our first go with some heavy land. But we've got experience now of grazing mustard and with cattle and sheep and stubble turnips. The plan is we should be nearly 1,000 ewes for lambing in April. So the plan is to get that to between 12 and 1,500 for the following year.
Arable farmers are fantastic at growing crops. Sheep farmers are good at raising sheep. In the past, where back on the family farm in Sussex, we did fine at growing turnips, but we've never had turnips that look as well as we have up here, where we've got someone that knows fertiliser, can put variable rate seed in, variable rate, all that kind of wonderful stuff that those guys know, and GPS systems that make the tractor drive straight and all that kind of wonderful stuff.
Right, okay, so I think one of the things would be the way in which you're going to approach it. So are you looking to have the enterprise as part of your own business, or would you look to contract it out or rent the land out in some shape or form? It's not always appropriate to invest the capital in the livestock. It might be something that you'd like to do on a more of an arm's length approach than it is buying the animals in, like they've done here on the monitor farm. The second thing is considering who's going to look after those animals. Looking at your staffing, do they like livestock? Would they be happy to handle livestock? Do they have the experience and the required husbandry skills to lamb ewes? Is that something that would be into their remit, or again, is that something that you need to look to outsource and therefore do the costings involved with them? And then some of the more practical things like what's the fencing like? Most arable fields are much larger and don't have the fencing that a lot of livestock fields have, excluding this one obviously. So looking at fencing, how practical is that going to be? What's the access to water like? And then perhaps also in the eastern countries, access to shade. That's one thing that people tend to forget. One of the key things I think people should consider when deciding to invest in a sheep enterprise would be the breed of sheep that they're wanting to invest in and what they're expecting that breed to do. So think about what their end game is. Are they looking to sell breeding stock, such as doing here on the farm with the New Zealand Romneys, or are they looking to just produce finished lambs? And if they are looking to produce finished lambs, what market are they looking to hit? They're looking to hit the early market that often catches a premium, or looking to hit the later market. And also think about whether they're going to sell direct to slaughter, through livestock markets, privately, and all of the cost implications of all those different settings.
We went for a New Zealand Romney, very low cost system. We'll certainly never produce finest butcher quality lambs, but we will produce what we jokingly refer to as supermarket sheep, so your average carcass size and average grading score. The main advantage is outside lambing, so in terms of infrastructure costs, no hay, no straw, no bringing them in, no building requirements. Everything lambs outside at about 3 or 4 ewes to the acre, and everything just gets on with it basically. The breed we've got have had an awful lot of genomic work done to it, so all the rams we use have been gene tested for foot rot resistance. So what you shouldn't get hopefully is an awful lot of sort of foot problems. Traditionally I think the UK average is 5 to 10% of the flock. I mean, I think we're down at sort of 0.5%, 1%, something like that. And there's all that sort of stuff. It's just I'm just basically a very lazy person, so I want to do as little with a sheep as possible. And if the sheep are doing all the work, that suits me down to the ground. We've tried stubble turnips. We've got a grazing trial with a variety of different things this year, but so far, to be honest, we've just stuck with stubble turnips because that was known and, you know, from my father's farm. The fields are all worm-free. There's no kind of parasitic burden on them at all because it's all clean, fresh grazing, high energy crops. I mean, they do tremendously well.
Cover crops are a great energy source, and coming into this winter period is when you start to see the ME of the grass dropping. Then it often gets wet, so then they struggle to get the dry matter in as well. So these sorts of crops, they're cost effective anyway, but the energy source of them is fantastic. They're a little bit lower in protein, so later in the season when they're heavily pregnant, they might need some supplementation with some protein. But again, it depends on what else they're being fed. There are some regulations, like with arable farms, but it's just getting your head around them really. And once they become the norm, they're really not that onerous. Yeah, well, we've got the website, the AHDB Beef and Lamb website. I'm the regional manager for the region, so they can get in contact with me as well. We're just in the process of putting a call for tendering to put together a document, a who's who and a what's what on incorporating livestock into an arable rotation. So that will be available early into next year. And we're looking at doing some work, as you know, cross-sector work with AHDB cereals as well, on putting some costings behind the benefits of the organic matter build-up and the benefits of a sheep system, which we haven't actually ever quantified before.